By the end of the night, none of them would leave unchanged. Snow fell the way it always did in this part of the city. Quiet, deliberate, as if even the weather understood where it was allowed to touch and where it was not. The restaurant sat behind a curtain of frost-glazed glass and soft amber light, an island of warmth designed for people who never rushed and never explained themselves. Inside, the air carried the muted sounds of cutlery, restrained laughter, and money behaving politely. When the Korean Mafia boss stepped through the door, the room shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly. Chairs were not scraped back. Conversations did not stop. But shoulders tightened, eyes lowered. The maitre d' straightened as if pulled by invisible strings. This was the kind of recognition that came from reputation, not introduction. He removed his coat with calm efficiency and handed it to the host without a word. Beside him walked his mother, wrapped in a dark wool coat, posture upright, gaze alert. She moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who had survived eras of men like her son, and outlived most of them. They were led to a private table near the window, snow drifting lazily beyond the glass. The boss sat with his back to the wall out of habit. His mother chose the seat facing the room. That was when she paused. Not long enough for anyone else to notice. Long enough for him to feel it. Her gaze had caught on someone across the floor. He followed it instinctively. The waitress stood near the service station, tray balanced effortlessly in one hand. She was black, mid to late 20s, her hair pulled back neatly, uniform crisp but worn at the seams. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't doing what most people did when they sensed his presence. She was watching the room. Not him. Not yet. There was something in the way she stood. Weight evenly distributed, shoulders relaxed but ready. Like someone used to reading danger without staring at it. When her eyes finally lifted and brushed past his table, she did not flinch. That was new. He had grown accustomed to fear disguising itself as professionalism. To flirtation pretending to be courage. To people who tried too hard to impress or disappear. This woman did neither. Her expression didn't change when she saw him. It didn't sharpen or soften. It simply noted him, the way one notes weather. For the first time that evening he felt watched. Menus were placed on the table. Water poured. The restaurant resumed its low murmur. Yet something had shifted, subtle as a change in pressure before a storm. His mother said nothing at first. She opened the menu slowly, as if she were not aware of the way her son's attention had narrowed. "You chose well," she said finally, her voice calm. Quiet. Respectful. He nodded. "You like it. I like places that know when to look away," she replied. Across the room the waitress moved. She took an order from another table, her voice low, posture polite. She laughed softly at something said to her, but the sound did not linger. It was controlled, measured. The kind of laugh used to smooth situations, not invite them. The boss realized he was watching her more closely than the exits. That irritated him. He had spent years mastering control. Of rooms, of men, of himself. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Dinner with his mother. Rare pause. No negotiations. No blood. No decisions that couldn't wait until morning. Yet something about the woman across the floor tugged at his awareness like an unanswered question. Why hadn't she reacted? His mother closed her menu. She said without looking at him, "will serve us." He turned to her sharply. "Mother." "I would like her," she repeated, her tone polite, final. The server nearest their table hesitated, eyes flicking nervously toward the boss. "Of course," he said quickly. "I'll let her know." The boss studied his mother, searching her face for explanation. He found none. She was watching the waitress now with quiet intensity, the way one watches a memory surface uninvited moments later. The woman approached their table. Close, the details sharpened. A faint bruise near her wrist, concealed but not gone. Eyes darker than they appeared from across the room. Calm that felt practiced, not naive. "Good evening," she said, voice steady. "I'll be taking care of you tonight." She addressed his mother first, respectful but not submissive. When she turned to him, her gaze met his fully. No hesitation, no fear. For a fraction of a second, the room seemed to fall away. The snow outside. Quiet luxury. The invisible lines of power he lived behind. She looked at him as if he were simply a man sitting at a table. The boss felt something tighten in his chest. Not threat, not desire, but recognition without context. The most dangerous kind. The waitress held his gaze, unblinking, and did not look away. For the first few minutes, he told himself there was nothing unusual happening. The waitress took their order with the same measured calm she'd shown from across the room. Her tone was professional, her posture respectful. She didn't rush, but she didn't linger either. If someone else had been watching, they might have seen nothing more than a woman doing her job well. But he noticed what wasn't there. No nervous adjustments of her apron. No quick glances toward the exits. No subtle recalibration of her voice when she addressed him. She spoke to him the way people spoke to men whose reactions they could predict. That unsettled him more than fear ever did. When she asked about wine, she directed the question to his mother first. Small thing. Intentional. His mother answered, pleased, and only then did the waitress look to him for confirmation. Their eyes met again, briefly this time, but the contact lingered a second too long to be accidental. It wasn't challenging. It was curious. He felt the familiar instinct to assert control rise automatically. A tightening in his jaw. A quiet reminder of who he was in this room. But before he could speak, she nodded once, as if she had already understood his answer. Something dry, she said. Not sharp. It's cold outside. It wasn't a question. His mother smiled faintly. The boss paused. He had not said a word yet, and still she had chosen correctly. He told himself it was experience. Good service. Nothing more. Still, his sense of the evening shifted. The restaurant noise seemed farther away, muffled, as though the space around their table had narrowed. When the waitress returned with the wine, she poured for his mother, then him, her movements precise but unhurried. You don't like noise when you eat, she said casually, setting his glass down. This table's quieter. He looked up sharply. How would you know that? Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Calculation, maybe. Or regret. I pay attention, she said. Some people do. There it was. The first hairline crack in his control. He had not been loud. He had not made demands. He had not drawn attention to himself beyond his presence. Yet she had noticed the way he angled his chair, the way his shoulders remained slightly tense even now, the way his gaze swept the room between pauses in conversation. That kind of attention usually came from men who wanted something from him. Or from enemies. She was neither. His mother watched the exchange in silence, her fingers resting lightly against the stem of her glass. The boss felt her gaze on him now, measuring his reaction more than the waitress's behavior. He decided then on a false certainty. She's just brave, he told himself. Some people are. Some people mistake proximity to power for immunity. That was all. Nothing worth considering further. When the appetizers arrived, the waitress placed them carefully, explaining each dish with quiet confidence. As she spoke, she addressed his mother again, asking whether the spice level was acceptable, whether she preferred a different arrangement. It was thoughtful, considerate, and subtly disarming. You've worked here long? His mother asked, almost absently. The waitress hesitated for half a breath. Not enough to be obvious. Enough for him to notice. A while, she said. Long enough to know what people want before they ask. And what do you want? His mother asked gently. The question drifted into the space between them, light as falling snow. It wasn't intrusive. It wasn't confrontational. It was the kind of question people asked when they already suspected the answer might matter. The waitress's hand tightened slightly around the tray she was holding. Her eyes flicked, just once, to the floor. When she looked up again, the calm was back in place. That depends on the night, she replied. His mother nodded as if satisfied, but the boss felt the shift. The invisible rules of the evening had changed. Fear had not entered the room. Curiosity had. He realized, with a flash of irritation, that his attention had fully left the menu. The food in front of him went untouched. His instincts, trained for threat, for betrayal, for violence, were focused on a woman who carried plates and spoke softly. That alone made him uneasy. The waitress stepped back, preparing to leave them to their meal. As she turned, his mother spoke again. "You're not from here," she said. This time the waitress froze. Not completely. Not dramatically. Just long enough for the moment to reveal itself. The restaurant noise rushed in around them, louder suddenly. Cutlery clinked. Someone laughed at a distant table. The waitress inhaled once, steadying herself. "No," she said quietly. "I'm not." Her gaze lifted, not to the boss but to his mother. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or warning. The boss leaned back slightly, his pulse steady but alert. For the first time that night, he understood something was unfolding that he did not yet control. And the woman who didn't look away had just been pulled into it. She hadn't planned to be here this late. That thought returned to her as she stepped back toward the service station, the warmth of the dining room fading as the colder air near the kitchen wrapped around her again. Outside, snow continued to fall in patient silence, layering the streets in white. A winter night like this usually meant fewer tables, shorter shifts, an early walk home with her hands buried in her coat pockets. But plans were for people with options. She worked nights because nights paid more. Because the city was quieter after dark. Because it was easier to be invisible when everyone else was distracted by warmth and wine and conversation. The restaurant gave her structure, a reason to stand upright when the world kept trying to fold her inward. She checked the order slip once more, even though she already knew it by heart. Table 12. The man. His mother. She didn't know who he was. Not really. She had noticed the way the room reacted when he entered, how the staff straightened, how the manager hovered at a distance, but she'd seen that before. Men with money carried a particular gravity. People bent around it instinctively. That didn't mean he mattered to her. What mattered was that her shift ended in 2 hours. That her rent was due in a week. That the quiet room she returned to every night waited for her exactly as she'd left it, unchanged, unclaimed, hers alone. She had learned not to expect more. As she moved between tables, she caught herself thinking about his mother instead. The older woman's eyes were sharp, but not unkind. They reminded her of someone she couldn't quite place. A familiarity that tugged at memory without revealing its source. That unsettled her more than the man's steady gaze. She had spent years teaching herself how to disappear into routine, how to become unremarkable, how to offer politeness without invitation, warmth without vulnerability. Kept her safe, kept questions away. Tonight it wasn't working. When she returned to their table to check on the appetizers, she noticed the man watching her hands as she adjusted the plates. Not assessing her body. Not measuring her worth. Watching her movements, as though he were trying to understand something just out of reach. That made her shoulders tense. She spoke carefully, choosing neutral words, keeping her voice even. This was not a table she wanted attention from. Whatever power lived in that man's stillness, she had no desire to be near it. Still his mother spoke again. "You work hard," the woman said, almost to herself. The comment landed heavier than it should have. Compliments usually slid off her easily. This one didn't. "It's just work," she replied. "No," the woman said softly. "It's more than that." The waitress forced a small smile and stepped back, excusing herself. She could feel the exchange lingering behind her, like a question left unanswered. In the brief quiet by the kitchen door, she let her guard drop for half a second. Long enough for the truth to surface. She was here because she had nowhere else to be. The winter had been unforgiving. Jobs came and went. People promised help and then disappeared. Family was a word that existed mostly in the past tense now. She had learned to rely on herself because reliance was cheaper than disappointment. This city didn't care if you fell behind. It simply stepped over you. That was why she worked nights, why she took extra shifts, why she didn't ask questions about the people who sat at her tables. Survival left little room for curiosity. When she returned with the main course, the atmosphere had changed again. The mother's attention was fixed on her now, unhidden, deliberate. The man said nothing, but his presence felt closer, heavier. As she set down the last plate, she caught a fragment of conversation between mother and son. Quiet, in Korean, meant for no one else. She didn't understand the words, but she recognized the cadence. Concern layered over restraint. Then she heard the surname. It wasn't spoken loudly. It didn't need to be. Her hand stilled on the edge of the table. She knew that name. Not personally. Not intimately. But enough. Enough to feel the floor shift beneath her feet. Enough to connect it to whispered stories, to headlines half-read, to warnings passed between people who lived on the margins of other people's power. Her pulse quickened. She kept her face carefully blank, but something inside her tightened. She replayed the moment in her mind, searching for mishearing, for coincidence, for any explanation that returned this table to normal. There wasn't one. She straightened slowly, her movements controlled, professional. The restaurant seemed different now. Smaller, sharper around the edges. She met the mother's gaze again and saw confirmation there. Not threat, not malice, but awareness. As if the older woman understood exactly what realization had just taken root. This was not a normal table. And whatever she had stepped into tonight, it was no longer just another shift she could walk away from when the snow finally stopped falling. The mother had been silent for most of the meal, and silence, she knew, was power. She had learned that long before her son ever took his first order, long before his name became something people lowered their voices around. Silence let others reveal themselves. It made the impatient restless. It made the dishonest talk too much. Tonight she listened. From her seat, she watched the young woman move through the room with a practiced steadiness that didn't belong to someone merely passing time. The waitress didn't rush. She didn't linger either. Every movement had intention, as if she were conserving something precious. Energy, dignity, hope. That alone caught her attention. The girl did not look at her son the way others did. There was no calculation in her eyes, no hunger, no fear masquerading as politeness. When she spoke to him, her voice carried the same tone she used with everyone else. Respectful, neutral, unimpressed. It unsettled him. The mother noticed that too. She had raised her son in a world where people bowed before they understood why. She had watched power wrap itself around him like armor, heavy and isolating. Few people looked at him now and saw anything other than what he had become. This girl did not see the crown. When the waitress returned to the table to refill their water, the mother spoke again, her voice gentle, almost conversational. "You work here every night." "Most nights," the waitress replied. The answer was simple, honest, no embellishment. "And before this?" the mother asked. The girl paused. Only a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The mother had spent a lifetime noticing pauses. "Different places," the waitress said carefully. The mother nodded, as though that explained everything. As though she hadn't just heard the weight behind the words. She studied the girl's face now, really studied it. The shape of her eyes. The restraint in her expression. The way her shoulders remained squared even under scrutiny. A memory stirred. It came uninvited, sharp as winter air. Another young woman. Another time when survival had demanded silence. When strength had meant endurance, not defiance. When the world had taken something it never returned. The resemblance was not physical. It was deeper than that. The mother's fingers tightened slightly around her teacup. "Do you enjoy the work?" she asked. The waitress hesitated again, then answered, "I'm grateful for it. Not happy. Not fulfilled. Grateful." The mother felt something shift inside her chest. She glanced at her son. He was watching the exchange now, his focus narrowed, his control subtly strained. He did not interrupt. He did not correct. He was being drawn into observation rather than command, and he did not like it. Good, she thought. It had been too long since he'd been uncomfortable in a room. When the waitress excused herself once more, the mother leaned back slightly, her gaze never leaving the girl until she disappeared behind the kitchen doors. "You're staring," her son said quietly. "So are you," she replied. He said nothing. The mother lifted her cup, letting the steam rise between them. "She reminds me of someone," she said at last. His jaw tightened. "Who?" "Someone you lost," she answered. The word lost hung between them, unspoken history pressing in from all sides. He did not respond, but his silence was louder than denial. The mother lowered her cup. "You forget," she continued softly, "that not everyone bends because they're weak. Some bend because they have learned when not to break." He shifted in his seat. "You're reading too much into this." "Am I?" she asked. She leaned forward then, just enough to remind him that before he was feared, before he was obeyed, he had been her son. And she had known him before power hardened him. "Do not lie tonight," she said. The words were quiet, measured, irreversible. He looked at her sharply. "About what?" "About why you're watching her," she said. "About why you brought me here. About what you've already decided." The waitress returned with dessert menus, unaware of the tension that had settled over the table like a held breath. As she placed them down, the mother noticed something else. The room had changed. A ripple of unease moved through the restaurant, subtle but unmistakable. A man at the bar had gone still. A server near the entrance froze mid-step. Someone had recognized her son. Power reasserted itself without warning. The mother met her son's eyes and saw the familiar shift, the calculation, the readiness. Whatever quiet moment they'd been inhabiting was ending. The girl stood between them, unaware that the rules of the night had just changed. And somewhere in the room, a pair of eyes watched them all too closely. The recognition spreads the way cold does, quietly, invisibly, until suddenly everyone feels it. The boss senses it before anyone moves. He always does. A subtle tightening in the room, a shift in breathing, the way conversations soften without stopping. He doesn't look toward the man at the bar. He doesn't need to. Power, real power, doesn't announce itself. Wait. He sets his napkin down carefully. For a moment, he lets himself feel how tired he is. Not physically. That kind of exhaustion had stopped mattering years ago. This was deeper. Deep. The weight of decisions that never truly ended. Of violence that followed him even when he wasn't looking for it. Of control that demanded constant vigilance, constant readiness. This was why he had brought his mother out tonight. Not nostalgia. Not tradition. Insurance. She grounded him. Reminded him of who he had been before the rules hardened, before consequences became permanent. New Year's dinners, holidays, quiet nights. He rarely allowed himself those anymore. Tonight had been an exception. A small rebellion against the life he'd built. And now, unexpectedly, there was her. The waitress moved past their table again, collecting plates, her presence calm in a room that was no longer neutral. She hadn't noticed the change yet. Or maybe she had, and simply refused to acknowledge it. That unsettled him more than fear ever did. He watched her hands. Steady. Unrushed. No tremor. No hesitation. Most people sensed danger before they understood it. Their bodies reacted even if their minds didn't. Hers hadn't. He realized then that she wasn't destabilizing him by accident. She wasn't trying to impress him or challenge him. She wasn't testing boundaries. She simply existed outside the gravity he exerted on everyone else. That kind of person was rare. And dangerous. His mother spoke again casually, as if the world hadn't just tilted. "You haven't eaten much," she said. "I'm fine," he replied. She gave him a look that said she knew better, but she let it go. Her gaze drifted toward the waitress as she disappeared into the kitchen. She carries herself like someone who's learned not to ask for permission. He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted his phone, typed a single message, and sent it without looking at the screen. The man at the bar left 2 minutes later. No scene. No confrontation. Just absence. False resolution. The room relaxed, unaware that it had been spared something. The boss exhaled slowly, tension easing from his shoulders, but not his mind. He should have felt control return. He didn't. 'Cause she was back. The waitress approached with the check, her expression unchanged. She set it down gently, then hesitated, not out of fear but curiosity. Her eyes flicked to his mother, then back to him. "Is everything okay?" she asked. It was a simple question. Harmless. Professional. He could have lied. Instead, something in him, fatigue, honesty, the weight of too many nights like this, made him answer. "Yes," he said quietly. "For now." The words slipped out before he could stop them. The waitress stilled. "Just slightly. Enough." His mother looked at him sharply, then back at the girl. "You should go home soon," the boss added, his voice low. "Tonight isn't safe." The waitress frowned. For who? There it was. Question no one ever asked him. He met her gaze, and for the first time that night, he didn't hide behind silence. For anyone who stays too long. The air between them tightened. This was not something she was meant to hear. Not a warning. Not an explanation. Truth. His mother said nothing. He simply watched. The waitress searched his face now, really looked at him. Not the suit. Not the posture. The restraint. The control that felt deliberate. "You're dangerous," she said softly. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. He nodded once. "Yes. And you're holding back," she added. That surprised him. He didn't respond. She stepped back, the weight of what she'd just learned settling into her posture. For the first time since they'd met, her calm shifted, not into panic but awareness. She realized then what kind of man sat at the table. Not reckless. Not cruel. Restrained. And that realization frightened her more than anything else could have. The danger doesn't arrive loudly. Never does. It seeps in through small disruptions. The wrong pause in conversation, the way a chair scrapes just a second too long, the absence of laughter where there should have been some. The boss senses it immediately, the way he always does. His spine straightens, not rigid but alert. His breathing slows. The waitress feels it too. She can't name it, not yet. Only that the room has changed temperature without the doors opening. The air feels heavier, closer. She's carried plates through chaos before. Arguments, drunk tempers, quiet despair. But this is different. This isn't emotional. It's intentional. Her eyes drift toward the far corner of the restaurant. There's a man there she doesn't recognize. Mid-30s, well-dressed but forgettable. The kind of face that slides past your memory. He hasn't ordered anything in a while. He's not looking at the menu. He's watching reflections in the glass. Watching them. The boss follows her gaze, then looks away as if uninterested. His hand moves beneath the table, fingers brushing his phone, not to type, not to call, just to confirm it's there. His mother continues sipping her tea, unbothered. She has lived long enough to know when not to react. The waitress returns to the kitchen, but she doesn't stay there. Something pulls her back out. Instinct. Curiosity. A quiet sense of responsibility she didn't realize she'd taken on. She stops near their table, pretending to wipe a nearby counter. The man in the corner stands. Not abruptly. Casually. He adjusts his jacket, steps toward the exit, then veers, just slightly, toward the boss's table. That's when everything slows. The boss doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't look alarmed. He simply turns his head and speaks, softly, to no one in particular. Stop. The word isn't loud. Doesn't need to be. The man freezes. For half a second no one moves. Not the patrons. Not the staff. Not the waitress who feels her pulse hammering now, loud in her ears. She realizes then that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't coincidence. The boss continues, his tone calm, almost conversational. "You're early." The man swallows. His eyes flick to the waitress, then to the mother, then back to the boss. "I didn't know." "That's the problem," the boss replies. "You didn't know." There's no threat in his voice. No anger. Just certainty. Two men appear behind the stranger, as if they've always been there. No uniforms. No raised hands. One gently places a hand on the man's shoulder. The other whispers something too quiet to hear. The man's face drains of color. He doesn't resist as he's guided toward the back exit. No struggle. No scene. Just removal. Irreversible. The waitress's breath catches. She hadn't seen the men arrive. Hadn't noticed them until they were already acting. That realization sends a chill through her. The restaurant exhales. Conversations resume. Laughter returns, slightly forced. People convince themselves they imagined the interruption. The boss turns back to his mother. "Are you cold?" he asks. She smiles faintly. "No." The waitress stands frozen, staring at the door the man disappeared through. She understands now. That moment, quiet, controlled, terrifying, wasn't an exception. It was how this man solved problems. She steps forward before she can stop herself. "What was that?" The boss looks at her, really looks at her, and for a second she sees something like regret flicker across his face. "That," he says, "was someone who forgot where he was." "And where was he?" she asks. The boss doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestures subtly for her to sit. Not a command. An invitation. She hesitates. This is a line she shouldn't cross. Every instinct tells her to step back, to pretend none of this happened, to protect herself with ignorance. But she sits. His mother watches her with interest now. No longer testing, assessing. "You were not the target," the boss says at last. The relief hits her like a wave. Then the second realization follows, heavier. "But," he continues, "your presence changed the variables." Her stomach tightens. "How?" "People take risks when they think something is unguarded," he replies. "They miscalculate when they think something is ordinary." She looks down at her hands. Ordinary. That's what she thought she was tonight. "And now?" she asks. The boss's gaze softens, just slightly. Now they know better. The words settle between them, heavy with consequence. Somewhere beyond the restaurant walls, something has already shifted. Message sent. Plan altered. Line redrawn. She understands then, truly understands, that by sitting at this table, by being noticed, by not looking away, she has stepped into a world where proximity is power. And power always comes at a cost. She lifts her eyes to meet his. For the first time that night, she doesn't ask another question. She already knows the answer. She changed the equation. The restaurant grows quieter as the night deepens. Plates are cleared. Candles burn lower. The illusion of normalcy returns in layers, but the waitress can still feel the disturbance humming beneath it, like a power line buried just under the floor. She keeps moving, refilling water, straightening cutlery, giving herself tasks so she doesn't have to think too hard about what she witnessed. But thinking finds her anyway. When she returns to their table, the boss doesn't look at her immediately. His attention is on his mother, who is calmly finishing her tea as though nothing unusual has occurred. When he finally speaks, it's not to command or intimidate. It's quieter than that. "You should go home," he tells the waitress. "Your shift is almost over." She nods automatically, relief flickering through her chest. Then something stops her. Not fear. Not curiosity. A sense that leaving now would mean pretending she didn't see what she saw. "I'm fine," she says instead. The boss studies her, unreadable. His mother's gaze moves between them, sharp but patient, as if she's waiting for a truth to surface on its own. The waitress takes a breath. You said I wasn't the target. No, he agrees. But someone was, she presses. And whoever that was. It ended quietly. Too quietly. The boss doesn't interrupt her. That, more than anything, unsettles her. I don't know who you are, she continues carefully. But I know you're not just a customer. And I know that man didn't leave because he wanted to. Silence stretches. The mother sets her cup down. You are perceptive, she says to the waitress. Not praise. Confirmation. The waitress turns to her. Then tell me I'm wrong. The older woman doesn't answer directly. Instead, she looks at her son. Tell her only what she can carry, she says. Nothing more. The boss exhales slowly. When he speaks, there's no attempt to soften his words. I protect things, he says. People. Faces. Lines that shouldn't be crossed. From who? The waitress asks. From people who believe power excuses them, he replies. She waits for him to explain further. He doesn't. And what does that protection cost, she asks. This time the pause is longer. My sleep, he says finally. My reputation. Sometimes my hands. He swallows. Other people's lives. The boss meets her gaze. Yes. The honesty lands harder than any threat could have. There's no justification in his tone. No pride. Just fact. The mother watches the waitress closely now, as if measuring the weight of what's just been said against her frame. People like my son, the older woman says gently, are not born into darkness. They step into it because someone has to stand there. The waitress shakes her head. That doesn't make it right. No, the mother agrees. It makes it necessary. The waitress turns back to the boss. And what do you protect, she asks. Really? His jaw tightens. For the first time since she's met him, he hesitates. Order, he says. Then, after a moment, and the people who would be crushed without it. And who protects you? She asks before she can stop herself. The question hangs between them, dangerous and intimate. The boss doesn't answer. That silence is answer enough. She realizes then that restraint, not violence, is what defines him. That everything she witnessed earlier, the calm voice, the quiet removal, the absence of chaos, wasn't about dominance. It was about containment. And containment always leaks somewhere. The mother stands, smoothing her coat. I will wait outside, she says. The night air is good for old bones. She leaves them alone at the table. The boss watches his mother go, then turns back to the waitress. You should leave, he repeats. This is not your world. She nods again. This time she means to do it. But before she can step away, he adds, stay. After your shift. The words are simple. The implication is not. Why? She asks. Because you saw something tonight, he says. And because you did not look away. She feels the weight of the choice settle onto her shoulders. Staying doesn't mean romance. Doesn't mean safety. Means proximity. And proximity has consequences. What happens if I say no? She asks. He answers immediately. Nothing. And if I say yes? His eyes soften just slightly. Then you will know more than you did before. And knowledge is never free. The mother's silhouette waits by the door, patient as ever. The waitress looks between them, then down at her hands. She understands now. This isn't about fear. It's about choice. And whatever she decides next will change the shape of her life in ways she can't yet see. She stands. The chair legs whisper against the floor, loud in the quiet that follows. The movement is small, ordinary, yet it feels like a declaration. Around them, the restaurant hums back into its late-night rhythm, unaware that a line has just been drawn and might be crossed. The boss does not reach for her. He doesn't speak. That, more than anything, unsettles her. She waits for the weight she's come to expect from men like him. Authority pressing down, a hand hovering at her elbow, a suggestion that isn't really a suggestion. None of it comes. He remains seated, hands folded, eyes steady, giving her space that feels almost dangerous. Go, he says finally. Not dismissal. Permission. The word lands wrong. Too clean. Too simple. She takes a step toward the exit, then another. Each step feels heavier than the last. Freedom should feel light. Should feel like relief. Instead, it feels like leaving something unfinished, like turning away from a door that has already opened. Behind her, she hears nothing. No footsteps. No command. No attempt to pull her back. Why doesn't he stop me? Why does that scare me more? She pauses near the coat rack. The cold outside presses against the glass doors, a reminder of the life waiting for her. The familiar struggle, the predictable loneliness, the safety of not knowing. She reaches for her coat and hesitates. Is this what you want? She asks, not turning around. Yes, he answers. And then, after a breath, if you want it. Consent, she realizes, is its own kind of power. One she isn't used to holding. She turns back to face him. You're not offering to protect me, she says. No, he agrees. You're not promising anything. No. Then what are you offering? He considers her carefully. Truth, he says. As much as you ask for. And the freedom to leave the moment you decide it costs too much. She studies his face, searching for the catch. There is none. Just restraint. Just an honesty that refuses to disguise itself as generosity. Fear drains out of her, replaced by something sharper. Respect. She nods once, then does the thing she didn't expect herself to do. She walks back. The chair waits where she left it. She grips the backrest, steadying herself, then sits. The decision is small in motion and enormous in consequence. Across the room, his mother watches without a word. Her eyes are not approving or disapproving. They are simply attentive, as if she is witnessing the fulfillment of a quiet hypothesis. The boss exhales, slow and controlled. Not relief. Recognition. You can still go, he says. I know, she replies. That's why I stayed. They sit in silence for a moment, the kind that doesn't rush to fill itself. The world hasn't changed. The danger hasn't vanished. But the rules have. Control has given way to consent. And consent carries weight. What happens now, she asks. Nothing, he says. Then, more honestly, everything. She smiles despite herself, a small curve of the lips that surprises them both. You're not very comforting. I'm not trying to be, he replies. Comfort is temporary. And truth, permanent. Outside, the snow begins to fall again, soft and relentless. Inside, the night holds its breath. She realizes something then. The absence of pressure doesn't make the choice easier. Makes it real. There is no villain to resist, no command to defy. Only a mirror held up to her own want, and the courage, or recklessness, to answer it. Across the room, the mother lifts her teacup and takes a single sip, eyes never leaving the table. The waitress feels it, the weight of being seen, not as an object or a risk, but as a person capable of choosing her own direction. She sits back, folds her hands, and meets the boss's gaze. Tell me what I need to know, she says. Not more. Not less. He nods. And in the quiet that follows, with his mother watching and the door still open behind her, the night tilts, just slightly, toward a future that can no longer pretend it was inevitable. They talk long after the plates are cleared. Not about business. Not about danger. Not even about what almost happened tonight. They talk about smaller things first. Work that grinds people down quietly. Nights that blur together. The exhaustion of pretending you're fine when survival is the only thing keeping you upright. She speaks about dignity the way someone does when they've nearly lost it. How easy it is, she says, fingers circling the rim of her glass, for people to decide who you are based on what you do to survive. He listens without interrupting, without correcting, without offering solutions. She tells him about the kind of loneliness that isn't loud. The kind that sits beside you at crowded tables. The kind that comes from being unseen even when you're useful. Especially when you're useful. He recognizes it immediately. It's the same loneliness that followed him into every room, no matter how many people stood when he entered. You learn early, she continues, that survival changes you. And if you're not careful, it teaches you to become someone you don't recognize. The words land harder than she intends. He looks down at his hands. Hands that have signed orders. Hands that have ended threats before they could grow teeth. Hands that have protected his mother at the cost of becoming someone the world fears. I didn't choose who I became, he says quietly. I adapted. It's not a defense. It's an admission. For a long time, he continues, I told myself that as long as I protected what mattered, the rest didn't count. And now, she asks. Now I don't know where the line is anymore. The room feels smaller, warmer, more dangerous than it did when there were rivals nearby. She studies him, not the legend, not the power, but the man who learned too young that softness could get you killed. What did it cost you, she asks. He doesn't answer right away. Outside, a car passes. Somewhere inside the restaurant, a glass clinks. Life continues, indifferent to the fact that something is unraveling at their table. It cost me the right to believe I was good, he says at last. Not evil, just good. She nods because she understands that too. Survival doesn't ask for permission, she says. It just takes. For the first time tonight, his composure fractures. Not dramatically, not visibly, but enough that she feels it. Air shifts. His shoulders loosen, as if a weight he's carried for decades has finally been named. You remind me of who I was before, he says. Before I decided the world was something that had to be controlled. She meets his gaze, steady and unafraid. And you remind me of who I could become if I stop believing control is the same as safety. Across the table, his mother sets her teacup down. The sound is soft, final. She has been silent all this time, letting the truth rise on its own. Now she speaks, not to interrupt but to conclude. My son, she says, her voice calm and unyielding, strength kept you alive, but it also kept you alone. He turns to her, something unguarded in his expression. A child's vulnerability flickers there, gone almost as soon as it appears. You taught me to survive, he says. I taught you to live, she corrects gently. You forgot the difference. The words strip him bare. There is no argument, no justification left to hide behind. Only the truth that survival, unchecked, has become a prison of its own making. The waitress feels it too, the finality of that line, the way it cannot be taken back or softened. Whatever happens next will not erase the years behind him. There will be no clean redemption. No absolution that comes without cost. The night has already done its damage. She stands slowly, not to leave, but to signal that something has ended. I should go, she says. Not because I'm afraid. Because some things need space to exist honestly. He nods. You're right. They walk toward the door together. His mother following at a distance that feels intentional. The cold waits on the other side, unchanged, patient. At the threshold, she stops and looks back at him one last time. You can't undo tonight, she says softly. But you can decide what it means. He watches her leave, snow swallowing her silhouette piece by piece. Behind him, his mother places a hand on his arm, not in comfort but in certainty. The night cannot be undone. And for the first time he knows that is exactly the point. The dinner ends without ceremony. No raised voices. No dramatic exits. Just the quiet scrape of chairs, the soft murmur of staff pretending nothing unusual happened, and the steady fall of snow outside that makes the world feel briefly clean. The bill is settled without discussion. It always is. He helps his mother into her coat. His movements careful, almost reverent. She studies him the way she has all night. Not with judgment, not with disappointment, but with the clarity of someone who has seen her son survive too much and live too little. You don't have to fix everything tonight, she says as they step toward the door. But you can't pretend you didn't see it. He nods. Words feel unnecessary now. Outside, the cold meets them instantly. Honest. The kind of cold that doesn't pretend to be anything else. The waitress stands a short distance away, waiting for a cab. The streetlight casts her shadow long and thin against the snow, stretching toward him and then away again, as if undecided. For a moment none of them move. There is no promise exchanged, no plan made, no illusion of safety offered or requested. Just the shared understanding that whatever happened tonight cannot be folded neatly into the past. He turns first. "Take care of your mother," she says simply. He almost tells her to be careful, almost says something about protection, about calling if she needs anything. The old instincts rise quickly, control disguised as concern. But he stops himself. "You too," is all he says. She nods once, then walks away. Each step leaves a mark in the snow that disappears almost immediately, erased by the falling white. His mother watches her go, then looks at him. "You didn't reach for her," she observes. "I wanted to," he admits. "That's how you know it mattered." They get into the car. The door closes with a soft, final sound. As the city moves past the window, he feels the absence settle in, not of her specifically, but of the man he was an hour ago. The king who entered the restaurant certain of his place in the world. Certain that control was the same as stability. Certain that restraint was the highest form of mercy. Now all of that feels thinner. Back home, the house greets them with its familiar silence. Warm, ordered, impersonal. His mother removes her coat and pauses in the doorway. "You don't need to become someone else," she tells him. "You just need to remember who you were before fear taught you to rule instead of live." He watches her disappear down the hall. Alone now, he stands by the window and looks out at the night. Snow still falling. Streets still moving. Lives continuing without him. 4 years people have changed because of him. Tonight, he changes because of someone who had no reason to fear him, and chose not to. Not because she was reckless. Not because she was unaware. But because she saw the man beneath the reputation and refused to treat him as either a monster or a savior. That, he realizes, is what unsettles him most. Power can be managed. Violence can be contained. Fear can be controlled. Being seen cannot. Across the city, she steps into her apartment, peels off her coat, and leans against the door for a moment longer than necessary. Her hands are steady, but her chest feels tight. She tells herself she did the right thing. That walking away was strength. Still, she cannot shake the feeling that something has shifted. Not toward safety, not toward romance, but toward consequence. They will not wake up tomorrow the same people who sat at that table. There will be no dramatic fallout. No immediate transformation. Just a series of quiet decisions, made differently now that the truth has been named. The snow keeps falling. The night stretches on. He went to dinner as a king. He left knowing the woman he met saw the man beneath the crown. And that was the most dangerous thing of all.